The stories of elegant balls, huge castles, and chivalrous knights paint such a pretty picture of the past, but they were called the Dark Ages for a reason. Anything and everything could kill you. The weather, the food, the people, the utensils, the makeup, and, if you had terrible luck, even just touching the wrong surface. So let's find out why you wouldn't survive. Life. Okay, so statistically speaking, if you were born during that time, you'd most likely be a peasant, and they had it pretty rough. You'd swear fealty to the lord of the land you worked on, and as compensation for the protection, work, and living space he gave, you'd be obligated to give him a portion of whatever you grow. And on the off chance you had a bad harvest due to the weather, then you'd probably be doing the 1 meal a day, or only water for 30 days challenge. Famines were pretty common, and the most obvious consequence of famine? Starvation. With crops failing and food scarce, people simply didn't have enough to eat. And even if you managed to scrounge up some scraps, it probably wasn't good for you. The lack of proper nutrients would leave you weak, malnourished, and susceptible to disease, basically snowballing into a worse situation. Food. Even if you didn't starve to death, there's still a good chance your food might kill you. And since no one really cared about hygiene or expirations, food was a game of Russian roulette every time. You never knew what was in your meal at an inn or monastery. Food poisoning was a constant threat with spoiled meat, funky cheese, and questionable stew. And since sewage disposal wasn't a priority, they'd use the same contaminated river water for cooking and drinking. This is why cholera was such a popular disease back then. The ingredients of the food weren't treated any better either. Undercooked meat and unwashed vegetables were a common invitation to a parasite party in your gut. Tapeworms, roundworms, and their creepy-crawly cousins loved hitching a ride to your stomach and just having a party. And when you actually fell ill, your options were either the Grim Reaper or a doctor, but both would end up sending you to hell anyways. No wonder their lifespans were so short. Disease. Now you've got a headache, or maybe stomach pain from all those worms in there. But popping an Adderall or a Tylenol isn't an option in the Dark Ages. The best they'll give you is some herbal tea and an ointment and call it a day. With no concept of hygiene or germs, nobody cleaned anything properly. You could be eating out and come back home carrying the plague because someone didn't wash the rat dropping off the spoons. Bathrooms in the Dark Ages were basically biohazard zones. Public options were scarce, so everyone went wherever, whenever. You'd die from the smell sooner than anything else. Private toilets weren't much better. Fancy castles had outhouses that emptied straight into rivers and streets. And if you decided to get your mind off your horrible existence by hooking up, then congratulations! Now you've got syphilis. The symptoms include unsightly skin rashes, blindness, and ultimately, death. Doctors. Okay, let's say now you've gotten sick. What do? You pay a visit to our Dark Ages doc, who diagnosed you based on the 4 humors, also known as fluids in your body: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Feeling a little sluggish? You clearly had too much phlegm, which your physician would cure through a process involving questionable concoctions and a sudden urge to expel anything that ever entered your digestive system. And if that didn't make you feel better, then you'd be thrown to the bloodsuckers. Not these guys, these guys. These leeches would suck out all that bad blood inside you, making you feel better. But if they were in a rush, they would just cut an artery and let you bleed out. Doctors in the Dark Ages were also big believers in the stars. Need surgery? Better check the moon cycle first. Feeling a bit under the weather? Must be Jupiter in retrograde. This reliance on astrology over actual medical knowledge led to some truly bizarre diagnoses and treatments, like using boar bile as an enema. And as you can imagine, many patients ended up dead, either from the weight or from the treatment. War. Peasants, who made up most of the population, were especially vulnerable in war. Swearing their undying loyalty to the lord of the land they worked on, they were forced to provide military services when demanded. So every time your rich lord called his banners, you got drafted. But with limited training and rusty weapons, you were cannon fodder. While you were at war, there wasn't any peace for your family back home either. Taxes went up to fund the war effort, leaving you with less food and resources for your family. Then warriors might trample your crops, steal your livestock, and leave your village in ruins. And even if by some luck your village wasn't directly attacked, soldiers might roam the countryside, stealing, pillaging, unaliving, and assaulting as they please. Even if you weren't on the front lines, being crammed together with so many sweaty men sharing everything from food to fleas, including overflowing latrines and zero idea of how to clean a wound, you've got the perfect recipe for a disease party. Even a tiny scratch could be deadly. Infections would spread throughout the army as no one cared about safety protocols like sanitized instruments and clean areas. Food, utensils, even tents, everything was fair game for germs. One cough, sneeze, or even a touch on a contaminated surface and you could get the plague. And if that wasn't bad enough, rats, lice, and other freeloading vermin hitchhiked with the army too, spreading diseases like typhus and the bubonic plague. Justice system. The Dark Ages wasn't exactly known for their fair trials and jury deliberation. Let's say you got accused of being a thief. To prove you weren't stealing, you'd have to carry a red-hot iron for a distance. If your hand became infected, you were guilty. If not, you were innocent. It makes perfect sense. You're just not paying attention. Even if you did survive, there was no guarantee the infection wouldn't kill you. Another exciting way to prove your innocence was trial by combat. In true Game of Thrones fashion, you or your hired champion would fight your accuser in a death match. The winner would be deemed truthful. But at least here you have a fighting chance, because for other crimes, you'd just be sentenced to death. And if you thought surely a fair trial would prove your innocence, wrong. Even if you managed to get a jury trial, there wasn't any system in place to make sure they would be impartial. Imagine if the fate of your life was in the hands of your ex. Religion. During the Dark Ages, the church was at peak performance. It wielded significant influence, shaping not only spiritual matters, but also politics, everyday life, and even healthcare. People deeply devoted to religious teachings and superstitions and questioning the church's authority was a heresy, sending you straight to the execution. The church believed disease was a divine punishment, and any scientific progress was the devil's work, basically. Dissection of human bodies, a crucial practice for anatomical understanding, was strictly forbidden. Getting caught doing that would send you straight to the dungeons, where only God knows what will happen to you. This, combined with the insistence on following ancient texts like Galen's writings, hindered medical progress. The church wanted you to focus on praying the illness away, or donating to the church to save your afterlife. So while they get rich off donations, you get eternal salvation. Makeup. Now, let's assume you avoided getting ill or injured. If you were a woman and wanted to feel good with some makeup, well, now you're dead. Makeup in the Dark Ages was made up of very toxic ingredients like lead or arsenic. Lead was used in face products to give you that undead vampire-like complexion. It worked, but at a huge cost. The more you used it, the more poisoned you became due to the lead, with symptoms like irritability, insomnia, and madness. And since it messed up your skin too, you'd keep needing more of it to cover the new spots of your skin peeling off. So, bloodshot eyes, a corpse-like complexion, and periods of insanity. No wonder so many women were getting accused of being witches. Lipstick wasn't a safe option either. Historical records show that lipstick, particularly the red lipstick used during these times, contained toxic substances like mercury. The long-term use of this lipstick would result in eventual death. But it wouldn't be until the 1900s that people would find out it was the lipstick that made their lips peel off and not some witch's curse. So what do you think? Could you survive at least a week in the Dark Ages? Share your opinions and strategies in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.